Chapter 7. Reuben Smith. Mr. York stayed in London for a long time. While he was away, a man called Reuben Smith looked after the stables. He was a bad-tempered man, and all the horses wanted Mr. York to come back soon. One spring day, I heard Lord Westerly talking to Reuben. "The small carriage needs painting, Reuben. I want it to be smart enough for Lady Westerly when she feels better. Take it to the carriage makers in town, and then you can ride Black Beauty back." Reuben put on my harness and hitched me to the small carriage. Then he jumped up onto the driving seat. Mr. Blantyre came out of the house. "I want to go to the station, Reuben," he said, and he stepped into the carriage. When we arrived at the station, Mr. Blantyre jumped out and said to Reuben, "I'm going away for a short time. Take care of your mistress, and don't let anyone else ride Beauty." We took the carriage to the carriage makers and left it there. Then Reuben rode me to an inn. "Feed my horse," he said to the stableman. "I will be back for him at 4 o'clock. I knew I had a loose shoe, but the stableman didn't notice it until 3:45. When Reuben arrived, the man showed him my shoe. "You must replace that shoe before you ride home," he said. "Loose shoes are dangerous. Your horse could fall." "Oh, it will be all right," replied Reuben. "I'll take him to the blacksmith tomorrow. I'm going to meet some old friends now. I'll be back here at 6 o'clock. But Reuben didn't come back at 6 o'clock, or 7 o'clock, or 8 o'clock. At 9 o'clock, he rushed into the stables. I could see he was in a bad temper. He put on my saddle quickly and jumped onto my back. It was dark when we set off for home. I went as fast as I could, but Reuben used his whip on me. "We're late, Beauty! Hurry up!" he shouted. The road was rough, with lots of stones. Soon my loose shoe came off. Reuben didn't notice, and we continued at a fast pace. My hoof was now split and broken. It hurt badly. Suddenly, I stood on a large stone and dropped to my knees. Reuben fell to the ground and lay quite still. I stood up slowly. My hoof was very painful. Reuben tried to get up, but then he fell back to the ground again with a groan. Then there was silence. Hours later, I heard the sound of a horse's hooves on the road and men's voices. I neighed to the horse. When she replied, I knew it was Ginger. After a few minutes, she brought the little cart to the place where Reuben lay. There were 2 men in the cart. One of the men jumped down and took Reuben's hand. "He's dead," he said. The other man came over to me with his lamp. He looked at my cut knees and my painful hoof. "The poor horse is not wearing a shoe on this hoof," he said. "I think he fell. When the horse fell, Reuben came off and hit his head on the road." He led me home slowly and left the other man to tell people the sad news about Reuben. In a few weeks, my knees got better, but Lord and Lady Westerly did not think I looked handsome enough to ride. When Mr. York came back from London, he came to my stable and led me away. I saw Ginger watching, and we said goodbye sadly. A man called Mr. Barry bought me. He didn't know much about horses, but he was a kind man, and he gave me a comfortable stable with plenty of oats and hay. His groom, Filcher, looked after me well. and at first I was happy in my new home. But one day, when Filcher gave me my supper, I saw that it was not oats, but bran. I liked bran, but I knew that horses needed oats to make them strong. The same thing happened the next day, and the next. About 2 months later, Mr. Barry rode me to see a friend of his. This man was a farmer. He knew a lot about horses. "Is your horse ill?" he asked Mr. Barry. "His coat looks dull, and he's quite thin." "Do you think so?" asked Mr. Barry. "My groom looks after him well." "Something's wrong. I'm sure of it." "I think your groom is not feeding him properly," replied the farmer. By this time, I knew what the problem was. Every day, Filcher brought his son to the stables. While Filcher gave me my bran, the boy filled his basket with the oats and took them home. One day, Mr. Barry hid in the stable and watched Filcher and his son. The next day, 2 policemen came to the stables. They looked in the boy's basket. "You bad boy! The oats are for the horse. They're not for you. You're stealing the horse's oats and replacing them with bran," said one of the policemen. The policeman took Filcher away with them, and I found out later that he was sent to prison for 2 months. Mr. Barry found another groom, but he was not much better than Filcher. He was lazy and did not give me clean straw every day. My hooves soon began to hurt. Mr. Barry was very cross. "Both the grooms have harmed my horses," he cried. "I won't keep horses any more. I'm going to sell them all." This time, I was bought by a London cab driver called Jerry Barker.